So today we're here recording our episode number 3 with Results Media. We've got Sloan Wilson here, and we've got Grayson Collins and Rex Lee here. We're here today. We're going to talk about Seth Godin and his book Linchpin.
Yep.
It's going to be a great few minutes here, hoping to get you guys some amazing nuggets out there. So, Linchpin. What is a linchpin? A linchpin is a person with a unique skill set and way of doing things. The combination of skill, talent, and abilities, which Godin defies in his book, make them indispensable. Probably the most important word that I got out of the book is indispensable.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I have that one written down. You know, basically he was talking about how it's an indispensable employee or an indispensable person. Even relating it to, you know, our last podcast with the purple cow. It's basically the purple cow of people.
Absolutely. Actually, you know, I was going to talk about this a little later since you just brought it up. In chapter 22 of Linchpin, bringing it to the purple cow, he really talks about the purple cow is the company that merely could just have all linchpins. That in itself makes the company a purple cow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, indispensable was actually the first thing that came to mind on my notes as well. And what stood out, he said something to the effect of, you know, you don't become indispensable only because you're different. The only way you become indispensable is because you're different, is to be different. And that's because, you know, if you're the same, you don't stand out.
Right.
You typically don't exert sort of, he calls it emotional energy,
right?
Which is, you know, kind of underlying a theme to the book. And you know, how many pages was this book? Did anyone recall offhand?
I don't know.
I mean,
a lot.
There's so many nuggets. You know, I kind of defy anyone out there to just open up a page, and you know, you probably could do a podcast. You know, on any of pages out there.
236 pages.
Yeah,
right. And there are, you know, in my opinion, 236 pages of nuggets.
Right. Yeah.
in there, and that's what's. You know, this could probably drag on for weeks if we wanted to.
Right.
So
I've read somewhere where someone wrote this and I loved it. And they said that the book reads like a blog over and over and over because they're quick little nuggets, just like you're saying. You get one after another.
Right.
It's incredible.
Full of good stuff.
It's hard to keep up. The book is so packed full.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just what you were talking about, Sloan, just being different, you know,
right.
One of those that stood out to me because he was talking about where that's how you stand out, right? Is you're different. But the reality is we all are different. And so we're all geniuses sometimes is what he was saying.
I love that
and
statement.
So
yeah.
If we are true to ourselves and we actually stick to what is us and what makes us different, like we can be geniuses in some aspect, which will set us apart from everybody else.
So the audience can understand real quick, what we're really talking about is linchpins, you know, that indispensable person at work, some of the things that he used to help draw you in real quick so the audience kind of can get a quick draw into this. Steve Jobs.
Yep.
Definitely a linchpin.
Yeah.
A Mark Benioff, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a linchpin. And so these are the people that are indispensable. It doesn't necessarily take the CEO to be a linchpin. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Just so the audience can kind of understand is, you know, we're talking about those amazing people that make the company turn. And one other thing real quick, just so the audience knows, it doesn't necessarily have to be a employee or whatnot. It can be just a special character. And the one that he uses is Parkinson. In which he's just an amazing doctor, which his profession is a doctor. That's how he makes his money. But he does draw up some of the most amazing, and we won't get into those details, but some amazing plans for the healthcare online. He's just an amazing linchpin. So I just wanted the audience to know that, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but just on your school of thought, Marissa Mayer of Google was another one that he pointed out that, you know, and he put it really interestingly that she combines artistic judgment with emotional labor, and that she makes the interfaces work. So she makes the interfaces work between the product and the end user, but also between the engineers and the product. And he states pretty interestingly that these weren't in her job description. She just did it, you know?
Right.
If you could write down in a manual her job descriptions, there'd be no need for Marissa Mayer out there. So it's this kind of
right. Then it wouldn't be art, right? So
right.
In order to be art, you can't just define it and then list it out. It has to be something unique and special to each person, each situation.
And I thought it was interesting as well that he spends a considerable time in the book about how we as a society have been trained or coerced or, kind of led down not a productive path. Like he tells about the
factory worker,
factory worker, right? And the new American dream, and the old American dream stuck a chord with millions of people, right? Keep your head down, follow instructions, show up for on time, work hard, suck it up, and you'll be rewarded. But
buy a house in all of those American dream components. Exactly.
And the new American dream, which I thought was so interesting, that be remarkable, be generous, create art, make judgment calls, connect people and ideas, and really we have no choice but to reward you. And I thought that was really enlightening for me. So
he really set the tone, and you brought up the factory mentality, and I really believe for the audience especially to understand the comparison. For the last 100 years, according to Godin, we were in the Industrial Revolution, but really according to him, and I buy into it 100%, is that we've had school systems train factory workers from all the way through our college, even the white collar person that's, you've got 100 of them in the office just following instructions.
Right.
Even that is truly a factory worker. And for the last 100 years, we have been trained to be factory workers. And as Sloan mentioned, that was like the American dream.
Yeah.
And that's what we had been sold for the last 100 years. And what Seth is really saying is that that's gone. Today, products and services are being made across the globe. And the factory worker doesn't have the same value that they used to. And if they don't make the change, you as an individual are not going to have the same rewards in the factory mentality that we used to.
Right.
That time has long gone. And that's what he's suggesting is if you want to be successful today, in the new world, you have to be a linchpin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. One thing that stood out for me too, he said, being good at school is a little bit like being good at Frisbee, right? It's nice, but it's not really relevant to your career, which I thought was funny. And he even went on to take a kind of a stronger stand to say, the people, the successful people, even that they go to the best schools, it's really a testament of who they are and, despite the school, not because of it. So he takes a pretty hardline stance on that, which is, different from our societal view, as it stands now, which is, kind of definition of a linchpin, I think, right there. So
yeah, and even going back to that factory mentality in the American dream, it actually was the American dream. It used to work because individuals couldn't come up with a factory on their own to be able to produce and have the means to make something great, right? And so they would build these factories. Then you would get a great salary, you'd get great benefits, retirement, all that. But most of that's going away. And then I like how Seth Godin even talked about. I have this quote. He said, "Capital doesn't dictate who can succeed anymore because we can all." Yeah, go ahead.
And he's really talking about on that. He really went into some great detail about how our economy worked, and you basically had management and you had the workers, and what he was saying. And he's throwing management, not just the white collars. He's calling management basically some sort of ownership, and he's talking about the investment.
Yeah.
So you've got some people 50, 60 years ago to start a business, you had to have an investment.
Right.
You had to have the factory. The factory cost money.
Yep.
And so what happened is the person that invested the money, the management and the owners of the business, are the ones that took all the money, and basically the math formula comes out. How do you build the product for the least amount of money to have the lowest price? Mm-hmm. And you have to have the least minimum wage to get away with. And that was the math formula for the factory time.
Yeah.
And just like you were preluding to, I really believe Seth is onto something, that the factory time is gone.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, on the school front, I wrote this down because I wanted to get the wording right. He said, you could very well go by a traditional school these days, and the sign would say, We train the factory workers of tomorrow. Our factory workers are very good at following instructions, and we teach the power of consumption as an aid to social approval. And then it's like, wouldn't it be enlightening if you went by a school and it said, instead of that, we teach people to take initiative and become remarkable artists, to question the status quo and interact with transparency. And our graduates understand that consumption is not the answer to social problems. Yet that is, might be the answer that we all need. So.
Right.
And this is coming from a marketing guy. I just love it. One of the things he wrote, instead of sitting down and blankly following orders, to be a linchpin, you have to bring your soul to work. I think
that's
it's
good.
Incredible. Another one is linchpins don't wait for instructions. They take initiative on their own. They get it done. So just some amazing things that I really believe that we have to pay attention to be successful today. One of the other things that I love that he talked about, and this is, for me, to be a linchpin, you have to like what you do. And one of the things that he had wrote is talking about compromise. And one of the ways I think most effectively to become a linchpin is to learn how to love what you do to make money.
Say that again, or expand on it a little bit.
Absolutely. And to me, it's one of the most important nuggets you get out of there. So to be a true linchpin, you got to love what you do.
Yes.
And what people don't realize is they think that passion just comes your way. They think that this is just going to happen. And I can promise everybody that's listening that you have to go out and find your passion. You got to make your passion.
Right.
And that's what he's saying, is that you've got to learn, you got to teach yourself. Optimism is the most important thing in being a linchpin. Absolutely most important.
Sure.
And you have to learn to love what you do to make money.
Yeah.
So at your job, so don't do it for a paycheck. Do it because you love it.
Yeah.
Paycheck will be a lot bigger if you do it for the right reasons.
Right.
And a lot of people, well, I just don't like it. Well, then figure out what parts of it that you can like and soar your strengths into those areas and like what you do. It's a choice. It's something that we can really look at. And the more that you do that, obviously, the more happy you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good. And I think that's why, when talking about how we're all geniuses sometimes, I think that really only comes out when we're doing something that we are genuinely passionate about. So if you start with that, then you're gonna, that's the only way you can even be on the right track to become a linchpin. If you're doing something just for the money or something you're not even passionate about, it's not going to work out.
Definitely not nearly as well.
Right.
I really do believe that. One of the amazing areas that I'm very much so looking for you guys' opinions on this, is the resistance of the lizard brain.
Yeah.
And we're three guys here. I have some knowledge of all three of us. I think all three of us are very aware of the lizard brain. And to me, one of the things, if you're listening to this podcast, is how do you really become a linchpin? We've talked about a lot of things and they all sound great, but it's very difficult to truly implement and accomplish. And one of the areas that he really gets into is the resistance. And I really believe this is the core of how to become a linchpin, is to understand the lizard brain. We have that. And the lizard brain is, our anger, our frustration, retaliation, revenge. He even used the word horny. And these are some of the things that the lizard brain brings about.
Sure.
That flight or fight
that
is biological. It's in most of the books in biology that we read about. Is very true. And that's what he's really associating to the lizard brain. And obviously the lizard brain isn't going to always lead us to emotional stableness in the most professional places that we'd want to be. So he really gets into the resistance. And so I'd really love to hear your guys' opinions and see what you guys think about what he talks about the resistance and how do you take that?
That's an interesting question. I think I don't know. I don't know what separates people from having that lizard brain and then working in defiance of it almost. Because I think that the lizard brain can also be that thing that makes you lazy or not put in the hard work or, convince yourself that, oh, I can't do it, so I'm just not even going to try. I deal with that stuff.
So one of the areas that came to my mind, and he talks a little bit about emotional stability.
Yeah.
Because if you really get into this, anger, it's the emotions, and we all know that we have to have our emotions. But the one area that I would love, and I loved this little section, but I really believe it's a segue into emotional intelligence, another book that I really, really find. And when I read that chapter, my mind kept on going to the book Emotional Intelligence.
It's a great book.
And I really believe that is an absolute foundation to becoming a linchpin, is that you've got to become emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, self-awareness.
And the one book that I read was Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And I loved it because it really gets into instructions on how to guide you to become more aware, because ultimately it's becoming aware. You got to be aware of your emotions when you get angry, when you get frustrated, and teach you skill sets to breathe. We all have these emotions. We all, and actually they're not bad. They're motivators if they're dealt with correctly. And so anyways, that was my takeaway, was because he just talks about it in one chapter.
Yeah.
But the resistance of the lizard brain, I think, is very critical and not very easy.
That's a struggle.
Right.
It's a struggle.
That's a struggle, I think, for everyone out there in some form or fashion. And it's almost like he wants us, or he's trying to shed some light on a whole different playing field, dynamic way to pursue tasks in the workplace. Yeah, one of the things I found most interesting was the definition of asymptote, or as he defined it, which was the pursuit of perfection. So those that are looking to really, rather than add, very incremental value onto something, but I kind of viewed it as like building blocks, like what's that wooden game that
Jenga.
You play? Jenga, like Jenga. Instead of just taking one piece out and placing another piece out, it's almost just like your toddler just bashing the whole thing over, right? And building from scratch. And he said, which was really interesting, he said, those that are looking to really change the world don't take up bowling, because you can only get 300 in bowling. That's the max you can get. You can't get 320. If you can get 320, then you're a linchpin and you've figured something out. But I think the way a lot of our, certainly company culture is these sort of, playing in the incremental rather than trying to step back and seeing things as a bigger change.
Yeah, and I love that he kept referring to, and this is kind of what you were talking about, that being a linchpin is an art, and art is never perfect. And so I love that, because so many times I myself, or people in general, get caught up in, I'm not going to post this blog, or I'm not going to start this business, I'm not going to release this product because it's not perfect yet.
Right.
But that's the whole thing, is art will never be perfect. If it was, then it's not art. It's just a commodity or
factory
whatever.
worker.
Yeah,
in a way.
That's the factory worker.
Yeah,
thing.
he had said that if you were practicing your free throw shooting and you were at 98%, and to get to 99%, just that 1% increase, that 1% takes as much time as going from 0 to 98%.
Wow.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'd love the audience to truly understand is how important this conversation is between being a linchpin. And one thing that he wrote that I really believe just resonates and really can stop a lot of people to think about this, and that is when the job description meets the automatic intersection, the job goes away. Mm-hmm. And this is happening more and more and more. Automation is taking over jobs. It's happening. As that intersection keeps on happening more and more, the linchpin becomes that much more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but it also takes people who were linchpins before that became automated to have to adapt to become a linchpin again.
And definitely, I don't believe linchpins are anything new outside of that. Many of us that didn't necessarily understand the workforce needs to have a better clarity of why to be a linchpin. Definitely 100 years ago in the factories, there were linchpins that were really running the factory. Absolutely.
Right.
The difference though is I think back then it was more challenging to become a linchpin in the factory.
Sure.
Is where today's culture is that companies don't exist without a linchpin, and just becoming much more important to be employable.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got to, I think by definition, or one of his definitions was, you've got to solve problems that haven't been predicted. You got to see things that haven't been seen. You got to connect people that needs to be connected. And so I think those are really the bountiful opportunities that we have in the modern world that, look back at our ancestors and they were just, in the assembly line, cranking out. And I thought that was an interesting sort of analogy he makes to the modern workforce as well. So he, kind of one of the hopeful things is when I was, reading through this, it was a little intimidating, but he stepped back. He's like, look, everyone can be a linchpin. Yep. Everyone can be an artist. You have the gift to, I think, give a smile to someone that, that needs it, or, it doesn't have to be, splitting the atom necessarily. But we all have it in us, and we've all, been, kind of geniuses. We've always, we've gotten ourselves out of a jam at one point or another. We've gotten ourselves out of a problem at one time or another, very uniquely. So we all have it in us to do.
Yeah.
Seth goes into really the difference between a non-linchpin and a linchpin, and it's really simple, and it's the way you think. Mm-hmm. And if you're optimistic and you're willing to do the work, you'll become a linchpin. It's really your mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your son say? If you
can.
If
you say you can, you can. If you say you can't, you can't.
Wise words.
So funny when he told you that a few years ago out on the boat. It was That's incredible. Awesome. He was probably like 8 years old trying to give Sloan advice.
Yeah, it's like, say that again.
It was hilarious.
Let's get him on the podcast.
And another thing that he said within that, because I believe that it's imperative that our audience knows that anybody can be a linchpin.
Right.
Anybody. And what he's saying is leading is a skill, not a gift.
Right.
It's something that you learn.
Yeah. I believe that. One of the other points, Rex, that you pointed out was he says to be a linchpin, you must be socially intelligent. And I think, especially in business, when you have to sell and you have to connect with people and build relationships, what do you guys think? How important is that? And what do you think that looks like to be socially intelligent?
I think it's extremely important myself. I'm going to go right back to Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Yeah. It's an incredible quick read book, and it goes to the heart of exactly that. And I really believe that that's one of the most important areas. If you look at just the income rates of emotionally intelligent people versus not intelligent, and you will find that there's more money difference between EQ or emotional intelligence versus IQ.
Right.
And everybody thinks IQ is this big driver of income. And I can promise you, emotional intelligence is more important than your IQ. So I really believe in I think it's very critical to success.
Yeah, that's sort of the foundation, I think, to propel yourself or take yourself up to that next level. He talks about, what the definition of art is. And, he says that the intentional act of using your humanity to create change in another person. But, how and how you create that change is sort of a cultural choice in the moment. No one wrote novels 1,000 years ago, and no one, took homemade videos 50 years ago, and no one tweeted about poetry 5 years ago. So, technology changes. By the time we get this out in the podcast, who knows what else is going to pop out in the world? But if you have that basis of foundation that he talks about, or the spirit of the linchpin, then you're one step ahead.
Yeah,
absolutely. I just have one last thing that I'll say, and I'll let you guys finish. Optimism is the most important human trait. And that was probably the most important thing I got out of the book. Outside of the lizard brain and the resistance and understanding that, I think chapter 8 was probably my most impactful chapter. But ultimately, optimism is just absolutely the most important trait a human can have.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I took that. And then, another thing that that sort of hit me. How should I put this? Not, sort of a delayed effect. It's almost like I didn't see it the first time I saw it. And then when I looked at it again, it was so obvious that, it just goes back to the biblical times, and it's just the more you give, the more you receive, right? And the act of giving and those kind of tenets.
Sounds like you're trying to quote Zig Ziglar to me.
We cross referencing books here.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
And it just,
generosity.
Generosity,
right.
And
the
you're
way questioning my optimism now, because I don't know if generosity, that's an amazing word. It's probably almost as impactful as optimism.
Yeah, and generosity is a generosity in time. It's your emotional generosity. It's, maybe you're waiting for that meeting and, instead of looking down at your cell phone, kind of lost in that, you turn to someone next to you and ask how their ailing mother's doing, or, it's the small things like that, I think, that really come back and sort of pay in spades.
Yeah, I think that just goes hand in hand with business, because a real business is serving people, right? And so you can do that with generosity or not. And it's going to dictate whether or not you're successful.
Awesome. Man, this was a great time. I can't imagine spending better time than sitting around having these discussions with you guys. Just love it. And can't wait to see what our next podcasts bring out. I do believe the next one is going to be Simon Sinek, Just Ask Why, which we really believe here ties in to Linchpin, Purple Cow, and everything that we do here at Results Media.
Yep.
Thank you for listening.
Let me sign off with one of my favorite quotes from Linchpin. He said, "People without dirty hands are wrong."